It would have fought off the deadly, below-freezing temperatures of the mountain nights. It would have saved Ted Weiher's frost-bitten feet. It would have saved his life. But no fire was ever made. Why? Why would a man choose to freeze in the dark when warmth and light were within arm's reach? The investigators were stumped. They tried to find a logical explanation. Could the men have been intellectually incapable of figuring out how to use the supplies? This was quickly dismissed. They were all high-functioning individuals. Ted had a job. Jack had a driver's license. They knew how to use a can opener. Starting a fire or turning on a heater would not have been beyond their abilities. So, if they weren't unable to save themselves, were they somehow unwilling? Did paranoia set in? Did they, in a state of delirium, come to believe the food was poisoned? Did they fear that lighting a fire would attract unwanted attention from something, or someone they were hiding from? The thought is terrifying. The idea that the threat wasn't the cold or the hunger, but a fear so powerful that it made them choose to die rather than reveal their location. It's a chilling possibility, one that elevates this case from a simple tragedy into the realm of psychological horror. The cabin was not a shelter. For some reason, it had become a tomb. They had food, they had shelter, they had fuel for a fire. So why did Ted Weiher slowly starve and freeze to death? And where were the other 4 men? The impossible scene inside. The Forest Service trailer changed everything. The search for the Yuba County Five was no longer a search for missing persons. It was now a recovery mission, and a homicide investigation rolled into one. The area between the abandoned car and the lonely cabin staggering 19-mile stretch of treacherous mountain wilderness became the new focus. With the snow finally gone, teams on foot and on horseback fanned out, hoping to find answers. Instead, they found only more tragedy. 2 days after discovering Ted, the searchers found more remains. About 11 miles from the car lay the bodies of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling. They were on opposite sides of a road, as if they had been walking together and simply collapsed. A day later, searchers found the partial remains of Jackie Hoot, a mere 2 miles from the safety of the cabin. His own father, who had bravely joined the search party, was the one who made the heartbreaking discovery. All 3 men, like Ted, had died from hypothermia. They had frozen to death in the wilderness. Discovery of the 4 men answered the question of where they were. But it did nothing to answer the much more important question of why any of this had happened. And it left one final, gaping hole in the story. There were 5 friends who went up the mountain. 4 were now accounted for. But where was Gary? Matthias? His body was not in the cabin. It was not in the woods. He was gone. The discovery of his tennis shoes, left neatly inside the cabin, proved he had been there. He had made it to the shelter. But he didn't die there. He had, at some point, put on Ted Weiher's slightly larger leather shoes and walked back out into the freezing wilderness and into oblivion. And so we are left here, at the end of the trail, with no answers. All we have is a collection of haunting, impossible questions that echo through the decades. Let us look at them. One last time. First, we must go back to the beginning. Why did they drive up the mountain? This was the first domino to fall. The single choice that led to all. The others. Was it a simple, foolish wrong turn? A mistake that cascaded into disaster? Or was it more sinister? Were they following someone? Were they fleeing from someone? Did they see something on the main road that sent them scrambling for the darkness and perceived safety of the woods? We will never know. Then the second question. Why did they leave the car? A working automobile with fuel in the tank. A metal box that could have provided warmth and shelter from the storm. Their lifeline. Why abandon it? The footprints showed. Them walking away calmly. This wasn't a panicked flight. It was a decision. What could they have possibly seen in the dark and the snow that they thought was a better option than staying inside a warm, safe car? Did a light in the distance promise a better shelter? Or did a threat appear that made staying in the car feel more dangerous than facing the blizzard outside? We will never know. Which brings us to the third, and perhaps most baffling question. Of all, why did they ignore salvation in the cabin? This is the core of the enigma. It defies all human instinct. The food was there. The fuel was there. The shelter was there. Why was it treated like a museum of survival instead of a refuge to be used? Was it fear? Did they believe something terrible was outside, and that making a fire or even moving around too much would alert it to their presence? Were they held captive not by locked doors, but by their own terror? Or did their minds, broken by cold and hunger, simply shut down, unable to perform the simplest life-saving tasks? We will never know, and that leaves us with the ghost of this entire story, the final and most haunting question. What happened to Gary Mathias? He was there. His shoes prove it. He was in the cabin, the place of supposed safety. And he left. He walked out of that trailer, wearing another man's shoes, leaving his own medication for schizophrenia behind, and vanished from the face of the earth. Did he find his way out and start a new life, a theory his family clung to for years? Or did he simply walk until he could walk no more, his body lying in some remote canyon, never to be found? Or is the truth darker? Could he, in a state of psychosis, have been the cause of the strange behavior, and then simply walked away from the tragedy he helped create? We will never, ever know. These are the questions that remain. They are puzzle pieces from a box that can never be completed. The story of the Yuba County Five is not a story with a neat conclusion. It is a chilling reminder that sometimes the truth is not just stranger than fiction. It is completely and forever out of reach. And so we are, left at the end of the road, surrounded by the wreckage of an unsolvable puzzle. For decades, police files have sat collecting dust. The families of the 5 men have grown old, carrying a weight of grief that has no name, a wound with no hope of healing. The snows have come and gone from the Sierra Nevada mountains countless times, but the cold, hard silence of what happened on that winter night in 1978 remains. To this day, the case of the Yuba County Five is officially unsolved. There are no answers. There are only echoes. There are only questions. Over the years, theories have swirled like the snow that buried the evidence. Some believe the explanation is not sinister, just incredibly tragic. They suggest the men, confused by the storm and their own disabilities, simply made a series of escalating bad decisions. A wrong turn, a panicked abandonment of the car, a growing confusion that made them unable to save themselves, even when salvation was within reach. A sad, cascading failure of logic in the face of nature's unforgiving power. Others believe the men were not alone on that mountain. This theory suggests that the fear we see in their strange choices was real, that they were running from a threat. Perhaps another vehicle forced them off the road. Perhaps they encountered someone in the woods who terrified them so completely that they chose to freeze in the dark, rather than light a fire that might reveal their location. In this version of the story, the men were not just lost. They were hunted. And then there is the most haunting theory of all, the possibility that the danger came from within the group itself. Investigators have always wondered about Gary Mathias. He depended on medication to manage his schizophrenia. Could he have, in a state of confusion, forgotten his medicine? Could his mind have turned against him and his friends, creating a paranoid reality that he then forced the others to follow? In this scenario, their bizarre journey makes a terrifying kind of sense. It was the logic of a mind that had lost its connection to the real world. These are just the theories. The truth, whatever it may be, was taken by the 5 friends to their graves and by Gary Mathias to wherever he vanished. So now I turn it over to you. You've heard the story. You've seen the impossible evidence. I want to know what you believe. What really happened on that lonely mountain road? Was it a tragic series of mistakes? A perfect storm of bad luck and confusion? Was there someone else in those woods with them? A silent predator who was the cause of all this fear? Or did the true mystery lie in the mind of one of the 5 friends, leading them all on a journey into madness? There are no wrong answers here. Go to the comments section right now and tell me your theory. Read what other people are saying. Let's discuss it. Because for a case this cold, sometimes the only warmth left is in our shared conversation. Let's try to piece this puzzle together. The media picked up the story, and the faces of the 5 smiling friends were suddenly on televisions and in newspapers across California. But the mystery only deepened. Where could they be? The answer would come 4 days after their disappearance. Not from the main search area, but from a place no one had thought to look. High up in the remote wilderness of the Plumas National Forest, a U.S. Forest Service ranger named Dave Gisiro was driving his snowcat vehicle through the mountains. A heavy snowstorm had just passed, and he was checking on a remote shelter. The road was treacherous, buried under feet of snow. As he rounded a sharp bend on a high-altitude road, he saw something that didn't belong. A splash of color against the endless white. A patch of turquoise blue. He approached slowly. It was a car. A 1969 Mercury Montego. He radioed it in. This was them. This was the car. Hope surged through the search teams. They had found him. But that hope would be short-lived, because the scene at the car didn't provide answers. It only created 100 more impossible questions. The car was 50 miles away from where the men had started their journey home, and nearly 7,000 feet up a mountain. It was stuck, but not badly, in a snowdrift. The first thing the police noticed was that there were no other tracks around the car, except for the men's own footprints leading away from it. This meant they had gotten stuck during the snowstorm, and it had snowed again after they left, covering their trail. The car itself was a puzzle box of contradictions. It was unlocked. Why would you leave your only shelter unlocked in a blizzard? The driver's side window was rolled down. Why would you let the freezing wind and snow into your car? They looked inside, and the mystery deepened. On the floor were the remains of their last happy moments. Empty milk cartons, soda cans, and candy bar wrappers from the Bison's market. But sitting right there on the dashboard, in plain sight, were the men's wallets. Their cash, their identification, everything was still there. This was not a robbery. Then the investigators made the most baffling discovery of all. They checked the gas tank. It was nearly a quarter full. That was more than enough fuel to run the car's heater for hours, keeping them alive through the night. It may have even been enough to help them rock the car back and forth to get it out of the shallow snowdrift. The car's undercarriage was clean, no damage, no signs that it had gotten stuck on a rock. And yet the keys were gone. The men had turned off the engine, taken the keys, and walked away. Think about that choice. You are in a freezing storm. You have a working car with fuel. It is your only source of heat. It is your only shield against the elements. It is the one thing that can save your life. And you turn it off, open the door, and step out into the deadly cold. You walk away from it, deeper into the forest, into the heart of the storm. The car was their only shelter from the storm. Why would 5 men abandon a perfectly good car and walk deeper into a freezing forest at night? After the discovery of the abandoned Mercury Montego, the trail went cold. Colder than the freezing mountain air. The heavy snows of 1978 fell like a thick white curtain burying the Plumas National Forest and all of its secrets. For the families of the 5 men, this was the beginning of an agonizing silence. The world moved on, but for them, time was frozen on that cold February night. March arrived, then April, then May, 4 months. 120 days of waking up to the same empty space at the dinner table, the same crushing weight of not knowing. The official search had been suspended, thwarted by the impassable weather. Hope became a flickering candle in a hurricane, a fragile thing that threatened to be extinguished with each passing day. The mountain kept its silence. Then, on June 4th, as summer began to breathe life back into the high Sierras, the silence was finally broken. The snow had retreated, unveiling the rocky, unforgiving landscape it had hidden for so long. A group of men on motorcycles, out for a weekend ride, were exploring the newly accessible backroads. They weren't searchers. They were just people enjoying a day of freedom, entirely unaware that they were about to stumble into the heart of a 4-month-old mystery. They ventured up a dirt road, far from any main route, a path less traveled. And there, tucked away in a clearing, they saw it. A Forest Service trailer. It was a stark, lonely sight against the backdrop of pine trees. It looked abandoned, forgotten. As they got closer, they noticed something was wrong. One of the trailers' windows was broken, a jagged hole gaping open like a silent scream. A wave of unease washed over them. This wasn't just an empty cabin. It felt like a place where something bad had happened. Curiosity, mixed with a sense of dread, compelled them to investigate. The door creaked open, and a smell, stale and foul, spilled out into the fresh mountain air. It was the smell of a place that had been sealed for too long, the smell of decay. Their eyes adjusted to the gloom inside. The trailer was small, just a single room, and in that room, on a narrow bed against the far wall, was a shape, a figure, completely covered by sheets. At first, it was hard to tell what it was. A pile of laundry? A mannequin left behind? One of the men called out, but there was no answer. Only the dead, oppressive silence of the room replied. With trembling hands, one of them reached out and pulled back the top sheet. The horror of what lay beneath would be seared into their memories forever. It was a man, or what was left of a man. His body was emaciated, skeletal. A thick, matted beard covered a face that was gaunt and hollowed out. He was lying on his back and had been carefully, almost ritualistically, wrapped in 8 layers of sheets, pulled up tightly around him like a self-made burial shroud. His leather shoes were missing. His feet, poking out from the bottom of the sheets, were a grotesque, swollen black, ravaged by severe frostbite. From dental records, police would later confirm the identity of the man on the bed. It was Ted Wire. The scene told a story of a long, slow, and lonely death. The beard growth and the severe weight loss, he had lost nearly 100 pounds, indicated he hadn't died quickly. Investigators estimated he had been alive, alone in this cabin, for as long as 13 weeks after he disappeared. For nearly 3 months, he had survived in this cold, dark room, while the world searched for him. The cause of death was clear: a slow, agonizing combination of starvation and hypothermia. A tragic end to a long ordeal. It seemed for a moment that part of the mystery had been solved, but that feeling would not last. As police methodically documented the grim scene, one of them opened a small storage locker in the corner of the room, and what they found inside didn't solve the mystery. It created an entirely new one. But then, the police found something else in the cabin, something that turned this tragedy into an impossible mystery. The story of Ted Wire's death, while heartbreaking, seemed straightforward at first. A man lost in the wilderness finds shelter, but is too weak, too disoriented, too far gone to save himself. It's a tragedy that has played out in the unforgiving wilderness countless times. The investigators on the scene likely thought they were looking at the final sad chapter of this case. They were wrong. The final chapter was just beginning, and it would defy all logic and reason. The truth was waiting inside a green metal footlocker, sitting just a few feet away from the bed where Ted Wire had starved to death. When the deputy lifted the lid, he wasn't prepared for what he saw. It was a treasure trove of survival supplies. Not just a few forgotten items, but a full-scale cache. Stacks and stacks of military C rations. For those who don't know, rations are meals in a can, designed for soldiers in the field, packed with calories and nutrition. There were cans of beef stew, crackers, beans, fruit cocktail, coffee, cocoa, and powdered milk. An inventory would later confirm there were over a dozen B2 unit rations in total. It was enough food to keep one man alive for months. It was enough food to keep all 5 men alive and well-fed for more than a week. The discovery was stunning. It hung in the air, a silent, screaming contradiction to the skeletal remains lying on the bed. But the mystery was about to get deeper. The police found a small, military-issue P3 8-can opener in the cabin. They examined the food rations more closely and found that about a dozen cans had been opened. They had been eaten. This single fact was earth-shattering. It proved, beyond any doubt, that Ted Wire, and presumably the others, knew the food was there. They knew how to open it. And they had eaten some of it. Thought this transforms the question. It's no longer, could they have found the food? We? No, they did. The question becomes, why did they stop eating? Imagine the scene. A man, wasting away, his body literally consuming itself from starvation, surrounded by a feast that could save his life. Yet he doesn't reach for it. He lies in his bed and lets himself die. It makes no sense, and the food was only part of the puzzle. The cabin held the key to another basic element of survival: warmth. The investigators found a propane tank connected to the trailer's heating system. It was full. All someone had to do was turn a knob to have heat. But the tank was off. In the corner of the room stood a small fireplace, clean and unused. Next to it, a box of matches. The cabin was full of flammable material, paperback books, wooden furniture. A fire would have been easy to start.
Imagine you are lost in a blizzard, freezing, hopeless. Then, through the trees, you see it. A cabin. Inside, there's plenty of food and fuel for a fire. You're saved. That's the exact situation 5 best friends found themselves in one winter night. But when their bodies were discovered months later, the cabin's food was uneaten, the fuel was untouched. And they had all starved and frozen to death. Why would they ignore salvation? This isn't a horror movie. It's the true, unsolved story of the Yuba County Five. Friendship is a powerful thing. It's a language of trust, of laughter, a shield against the world. For 5 young men from Yuba City, California, their friendship was everything. They called themselves the Gateway Grizzlies. There was Gary Mathias. He was a natural leader, the one who always had a plan. There was Bill Sterling, deeply religious and kind, the quiet heart of the group. There was Jackie Hoot, the youngest, who was rarely seen without his best friend, Ted Wire. Ted was the tallest, always smiling, known for his gentle nature and his love for a good joke. And then there was Jack Madruga, the driver. He was the only one with a license, and he was incredibly proud of his car, a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. To the friends, that car wasn't just metal and wheels. It was freedom. These men were more than just friends. They were brothers. Life had given them challenges. Each of them lived with mild disabilities that made the world a little harder to navigate. But together, they were strong. They worked jobs, they lived with their loving families, and they shared one great passion: basketball. They were inseparable. Our story begins on Friday, February 24th, 1978. It was a perfect night for the friends. A big college basketball game was happening just an hour away. To them, this was like the Super Bowl. Their favorite team was playing, and if they won, they'd be in a major tournament. The excitement was electric. They all piled into Jack's beloved Mercury Montego. Imagine the scene. A car full of best friends, laughing, talking, snacks in hand, heading out for a night of pure fun. It was a happy, ordinary night. The kind of night they had lived 100 times before. The game was a thriller. Their team pulled off a dramatic win at the last second. The friends were ecstatic, celebrating with the cheering crowd. Their journey home should have been filled with joy and stories of the game's best moments. But somewhere on that short drive home, in the darkness of the Northern California roads, something went terribly wrong. The laughter in the car must have stopped. The feeling of victory must have turned into confusion, and then, perhaps, into fear. They knew the way home. It was a simple drive they had made before, but they never made it back. Their families waited by the phone all night, but the call never came. The silence grew heavier with every passing hour. This normal night, a night that began with so much happiness, would be their last. They were about to make a single unexplained turn, abandoning the safe road home and driving straight into the heart of one of America's most chilling and deeply bizarre unsolved mysteries. Victory has a sound. It's the roar of a crowd, the squeak of sneakers on a polished floor, the pure, unfiltered joy of a game well won. For the Gateway Grizzlies, this was the sound of a perfect night. On February 24th, 1978, their team had just won a thrilling basketball game, and the five friends were floating on air. The world was simple, it was happy, and the road home to Yuba City was waiting for them. Inside the warm cabin of Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego, the energy was still buzzing. This car was Jack's pride and joy, a vessel of freedom painted in the hopeful colors of turquoise and white. It was their chariot, their escape pod from the world. Imagine the conversation inside, replaying the game's final heart-stopping moments, arguing over the best plays, the friendly banter that only brothers can share. The radio was likely playing the hits of the era, a soundtrack to their perfect Friday night. Outside the windows, the world was a blur of darkness and distant lights. The path ahead was familiar. It was a straight shot home, a drive they had made before, a journey with no surprises. Or so it should have been. Before they settled in for the hour-long drive, they decided on one last stop. A final celebration of their victory. Just before 10 o'clock at night, the Mercury pulled into the parking lot of Beeson's Market in the small town of Chico. The glass door chimed as the five men entered, bringing their boisterous, happy energy into the quiet little store. The clerk on duty that night would later become one of the most important witnesses in this entire story. She remembered them clearly. How could she forget? A group of five grown men, all talking at once, excited, laughing. They were on top of the world. She watched as they moved through the aisles, grabbing snacks for the road. It's in these small, ordinary details that the mystery truly begins. They bought chocolate bars, Hostess pies, cans of soda, and cartons of milk. They were stocking up for a simple drive home. The clerk recalled how polite they were, waiting patiently at the counter. She saw nothing strange, nothing out of place. There was no sense of urgency. No one seemed worried or scared or like they were looking over their shoulder. They were just five happy guys. She took their money, they took their bags of snacks, and they piled back into the Mercury Montego. She watched the car's red tail lights disappear into the night, heading south, heading towards home. It was the last time anyone would report seeing them with any certainty, because somewhere in the darkness that followed, the story takes a sharp, inexplicable turn. On the road from Chico to Yuba City, there's a fork. To the right lies the familiar highway, the safe and direct path home to their warm beds and waiting families. To the left, a different road begins. It's a road that leads away from civilization. A narrow, asphalt path that soon dissolves into gravel and dirt, winding its way up into the cold, desolate darkness of the Plumas National Forest. It's a road you do not take by accident. It is a road to nowhere, for a reason that would baffle investigators for decades to come. Jack Madruga turned the wheel to the left. Why? This single question is the first great pillar of this impossible mystery. Let's consider the options. Was it a simple mistake? A missed turn in the dark? It seems unlikely. Jack knew the area. Even if he was momentarily confused, the car was full of his friends, any of whom could have pointed out the error. You don't accidentally drive for miles and miles up a steep, winding mountain road without realizing you are no longer on a flat, straight highway. The very feel of the journey would have changed. So, if it wasn't a mistake, did they do it on purpose? Were they looking for a friend's house, a rumored party? Their families were certain this was not the case. The men were creatures of habit. After a game, they went home. They had work the next morning. They had no friends who lived up in the isolated wilderness of the forest. This leaves a third, more sinister possibility. If they didn't choose this path by mistake, and they didn't choose it for fun, was it a choice they were forced to make? Was there another car on that road that night? Was someone guiding them, leading them away from the safety of the highway? And into the wilderness? Were they being followed, chased? The thought sends a chill down the spine. But with no witnesses and no evidence, it remains just a dark theory. Whatever the reason, the decision was made. The Mercury Montego, their chariot of freedom, pushed onward and upward, climbing higher into the mountains. With every mile, they drove further away from help, further away from reason, and deeper into the heart of a snowstorm that was beginning to rage. They were now on a path with no exit, heading towards a fate that no one could have ever imagined. Why did they turn? They knew the way home. What could have possibly made them drive into the dangerous, snowy mountains at night? There is a unique kind of silence that falls upon a house in the dead of night when a loved one is missing. It's a heavy, suffocating quiet, punctuated only by the ticking of a clock and the frantic beating of your own heart. For the families of the Yuba County Five, that terrible silence began after midnight. 1 o'clock came and went. Then 2 o'clock, then 3. The happy excitement of the game was now a distant memory, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The phone lines between the 5 families began to light up. Is Ted with you? Has Jack called? Maybe they just stayed with a friend in Chico. But each call ended with the same answer: no. No one had heard from them. They knew their boys. They were responsible. They always called. This was not like them. As the first rays of morning light broke the horizon on Saturday, the dread solidified into panic. The 5 men were officially reported to the police as missing. The search began immediately, but it was a search in the wrong place. The police, working with logic, focused their efforts on the direct route between Chico and Yuba City. They scoured the highway, checked ditches and ravines, and contacted every hospital and law enforcement agency in the region. They found nothing. It was as if the 1969 Mercury Montego, with 5 grown men inside, had simply vanished into thin air. A day passed. Then another. The weekend turned into a week, and still there was no sign. The families were living a nightmare, suspended in the agony of not knowing.